Welcome.
Hey, Michael.
You don't have to turn that on. It's always on.
It's always on.
Always be recording.
If you're next to me, I know the mic's always on, man.
Welcome. Tim, why don't we start? I was going to say, why don't we start by talking about the beer, but tell us about this fish you caught yesterday first.
I did
Florida size.
Yeah, I had quite the adventure last night. I hopped in a boat at 8:30 and went out in Tampa Bay fly fishing and ended up catching the biggest fly rod caught fish of my life. Big old 80-pound tarpon, and fought it for over a half hour, got that thing to the boat, and man, what a journey. It was amazing. So Tampa Beer Week off to a good start for me.
For you personally.
Yes.
Up my way, I think those are sturgeons. That's what we talk about them as. All right, let's talk about this beer, Catalyst.
Yeah.
Tell us what we're drinking now, because I think most people probably still have a good chunk of it in their glass, and they'd probably love to hear about it while they taste it.
Sure thing. So yeah, this beer Catalyst is one that we've been brewing for quite a while now. This was actually our first honey beer that we produced, and since then we've gone on to brew a lot of different honey beers. Honey is just a spectacular beer ingredient, particularly I feel like in the world of farmhouse ales. Saison yeast loves honey. Honey loves Saison yeast, and this is a mixed ferm version, as you guys can all tell. But yeah, it's fermented in wine barrels, and the honey goes in at the end of the boil, and then we are also bottle conditioning with that honey. So this beer is a nice expression of our wild cultures, our honey, and our processes.
Anytime you're bottle conditioning with honey, you're taking a little bit of a risk there, right? It's not as an exact science as it would be dosing with priming sugar or something to that effect.
You know, when we first got into it, it was, but since then we've done it so many times that we've definitely fully dialed in. We know exactly what the sugars are and how to calculate for them. So, you know, a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, and, you know, like everything else, we eventually get it dialed in.
Now, when people hear that honey is an ingredient in beer, they often think of the taste of honey. Not a lot of that will come through in a finished beer, because obviously it converts and ferments out. What should somebody expect from the effect of honey in a beer like this?
Yeah, my theory on honey and the way that I personally perceive its flavor expressed in beer is that the fermentation process kind of deconstructs what the bees have done to take all of the flowers and, you know, whatever else they're feeding on, turning it into honey, and then you ferment that honey, and I find that those original kind of floral roots come out, you know, so it doesn't taste like honey itself, but I feel like it tastes like what created the honey in the first place.
Right, and the source of that honey can make a big difference there. I mean, the herbaceousness can come through, the floral qualities, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, it's a great way to accomplish, you know, achieving some terroir in beer.
I know you to be somebody who really appreciates their brew house out in the woods. Can you paint a picture for us as to the situation of Oxbow that you love so much? Tell us a little bit about like how it sits in the land, where it exists, and why for you it matters that it exists there versus somewhere else it could easily be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And our brewery, it's out in the woods in Newcastle, Maine. It's about an hour north of Portland. We're not far from the coast, only maybe 10 miles, but it's, you know, rolling kind of farmland, wooded forest, and that's where our brewery is. We're tucked in this little forest patch surrounded by farmland, and then there's a river right next to it that's very curvy, and it has a big old horseshoe-shaped bend, which is what an oxbow is and what our brewery is named after. And, you know, it's really peaceful up there. The water's beautiful. All the, you know, everything you drank from Oxbow, that water's coming from the ground right below the brewery, and we, you know, that's part of it, but also just the setting. You know, I feel like it's really conducive to just kind of I don't know, just a relaxed and fun and creative atmosphere to brew beer and just really focus on that. There's not a lot of distractions up there.
Take me a little bit further into it. I'm interested in sort of the sense memory of the place. When you get there in the morning, tell me, like, what do you smell? What do you hear? What does it feel like to be in there? Because I got to imagine for the last couple of years especially, it's been a little bit more of a solitary pursuit. I don't know. Take me into what it feels like to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of starts when you take the left off of Jones Woods Road into our driveway, and that's when the adventure begins, depending on the season. You know, if it's springtime, you're in for some mud. If it's winter, you might be in for some ice or some snow. And if you hit it just right, it's nice, clean gravel driveway, but that's kind of the exception to the rule. But then you walk into the brew house, and, you know, depending on what's going on, you've got the various brew house smells going on, if it's fermentation or wort boiling or whatever it is. But, the brewery is definitely, when we started it, we did not have a very big budget. We were, spent money where we could and didn't spend as much where we maybe should have. So at this point, the floors are, the concrete's pitting a little bit. There's some patina that's showing, but
you love that though, don't you?
Yeah, so the inside of the tanks are clean as hell, but the rest of the brewery's got some rustic charm that seems to keep building. But just peaceful, and the rusticity is fully intact, I assure you.
What is it about those aesthetics, let's call them broadly, that relate to the kinds of beers you like making in that place? Is there a relationship there for you? Is that like a continuation of an aesthetic, or is that kind of arbitrary? How do you think about that?
It's definitely a continuation of an aesthetic, and some of our comfort levels, and also the just kind of the aesthetic environment that we like being surrounded by is definitely influenced by some of the Belgian breweries that inspired us. We're not quite as funky and wild and crazy as Fantôme, but we are not nearly as nice and polished as DuPont. But certainly the Belgian farmhouse breweries are very big inspirations for us, and there's certainly anybody that's toured some of the smaller Belgian breweries will quickly find a similarity between our brewery and some of those.
Yeah, I certainly see it in the place and in the beers themselves. There seems to be a pretty strong Japanese aesthetic that comes through in the designs of your labels. What is your connection to that culture? What is your influence there? It seems pretty clear to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to come through pretty strongly.
No, absolutely. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's very obvious. But big Japanese influence. I actually lived there for my entire kind of high school time. Moved there when I was 14. My family lived there for 6 years, and just that's where I cut my teeth on beer. I started bartending when I was 15, and
in Japan,
little izakaya.
That's a gig.
And and just fell in love with the Japanese lagers, and the drinking age there is a drinking age, but it's not super well enforced. At least it wasn't in the late 90s. And so I was rolling into bars and beer stores and able to think about beer and choose beer and talk about beer in a more mature adult way, as opposed to kind of the typical American high school experience. So I was fortunate to kind of get a head start at an early age, but also that country and culture just has such an incredible aesthetic, and just culturally it's spectacular and very close to my heart, and a lot of that has really come through in Oxbow, because it's really a big part of me.
What's an example of something you think you might have carried from those experiences into either how you make beer, or how you serve the beer, or how you drink the beer? Is there something that Oxbow might do that maybe you would connect back to that experience other people might think is just sort of happenstance?
I think it's the focus. It's the tight focus that we have as a brewery. I feel like Oxbow has maybe more of a kind of laser sharp focus on beer styles than a lot of other breweries do. For the first 5 years of our brewery, we exclusively brewed farmhouse ales. Mm-hmm. And then we ventured out into the world of lagers, and at this point we only brew farmhouse ales and we only brew lagers. And in Japan, people are really specialists. You're not going to a restaurant that sells ramen and sushi and tempura. It's one or the other. Yeah. And so I always kind of valued that approach to
what is
attempting to master.
What's appealing about that to you?
I just think the more time you spend focusing on one thing, the better you get at it. And although personally in my life I like all kinds of different things, and I'm a dabbler, and that's all good, but within the Oxbow and our specific focus, we choose to really focus on a specific beer style and kind of beer brewing ethos.
How does that play out in something like wild ales? The things that most people are enjoying today as part of the festival. How does focus and consistency or repeatability kind of overlap with a process that some people talk about as very loose and artistic and interpretive? What's the delta there? What's the relationship between those two things for you?
I mean, it's kind of a beautiful balance of within the world of wild ales, there's all kinds of room for artistic interpretation, but if you don't have the science end of things right, then, you're going to get bad beers and bottle bombs and flat bottles and all that all that stuff. So, it really is kind of a combination of having that focus, but then also, bringing all the science into it as well.
When I think about the Japanese approach to craft, especially things that are made by hand in a very manual way, a lot of the consistency that comes out in whether it's pottery or ceramics or woodworking a lot of the consistency belies the complexity of the human hand behind it. Like, it almost becomes sort of a huge reveal when you see how those things get made, and you realize that they're actually made by hands that have been doing that thing for decades.
That's it right there, doing that thing for decades. That's kind of goes back to what I was talking about, having that focus. You have folks that are just doing that same thing over and over again, and that's where mastery comes from. And I'm in no way saying that we've achieved mastery, but the more you do it, the closer you get to it. So
how many turns have you done on Catalyst over the years, do you think?
We started brewing Catalyst, I believe, 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And when we do it once, maybe twice a year, depending. So, but we've got a wide variety of beers, but they really are cut from the same cloth. Mm-hmm. So even if there are slight variations in the ingredients or the process, it's part of the same general production approach.
For these kinds of beers, do you typically have a small set of base beers that you're working from, or do you design a recipe to go into that wood, sort of in a one-to-one relationship? Is it a one-to-many or one-to-one?
It's changed a bit over the years, and in the earlier years, there was a different beer for every different thing, and we were just constantly trying to make something new and learn something with every different brew. But as we have learned and dialed in our approach, we found that it's just a more efficient approach to brewing, to kind of make a tighter focus and brew fewer base beers and take them in different directions than having all of these different base beers. I mean, compared to a lot of breweries, we still have a lot of different brews, but compared to us, 6-7 years ago, we're doing fewer base beers that we have really fully dialed in and just taking them in different directions.
I would imagine that gives you more opportunities to learn rather than fewer, because when you're changing so many X factors, it's hard to sort of track what contributed to this outcome in a specific way. But if you're doing the same thing every time, those little tweaks, they really reveal themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, it is all relative. When I talk about doing lots of different beers, it's like, well, they're all fermented with the same mixed cultures and the same kind of thing, but, maybe we'll tweak a temperature here, or we'll do a little addition here or there. So it's, for us, they might be big changes, but if you were taking a big picture view from another brewery, it might look like, oh, you're doing all the same stuff. But to us, it's like, oh, little tweaks all the time.
Another beer that you have here with you today is using some grain from Maine, and I know that's becoming increasingly important to you guys. Tell us about that beer and what it is about that agricultural relationship that really matters to you.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate to live in a state that has such a rich agricultural history, and then also where we are at today, the Maine farmers have been very supported by our restaurant industry, food industry, and then also the brewers as well. So it's been this really nice kind of symbiotic relationship where the ingredients have been produced and are of increasingly high quality, and the brewers are using more and more of them, therefore giving more resources to the farmers to produce even more. And so in the case of the malt, we've got these 2 beautiful bags of Maine malt right here. And those guys up there, multi-generation farmer up northern Maine, and they have been growing barley up there and wheat for a very long time, but sending it to Canada for commodity malt essentially, even though the base malt is such high quality. And it wasn't until they had the confidence in the local industry to build their own malting facility that they were able to keep that grain in the state, malt it in small, very hands-on batches to extremely high quality, and then turn around and sell it to Maine brewers. And then other brewers have been tasting Maine beer and really digging what we're able to produce from these Maine grains. And these grains are now all over the place. We're sitting in Florida. There's 2 bags right there. These guys were brewing with it yesterday. It's awesome.
That's a long way from commodity.
Yeah, totally.
I think the agricultural side of beer is a way of kind of zooming out on the value of brewing and the community and the network and the value chain that connects to. Some other ways in which I think you personally have kind of zoomed out from the specifics of just running a small little brewery is in some of the more like lifestyle and brand connections that you've made through Oxbow. And I know one of them is with Yeti. I know you've got some folks in the audience today that are from Yeti that you have a pretty cool partnership with. I've heard you talk about really your admiration for things like Patagonia, which is another great brand that I think has zoomed out way beyond the specifics of what they produce into the values and the network. What is it about zooming out from the specifics of beer into the sort of the more lateral connections that it makes that speak to you, that matter to you? Why is it worth thinking about those things as a brewer?
I mean, the beer industry is, relatively young. In America, the beer industry is relatively young. And although there are, I have deep admiration and draw tremendous inspiration from a lot of American brewers, including some who are about to speak after me, all of whom are about to speak after me. But, you know, you look at companies that are looking at a bigger, broader approach and kind of what they've been able to accomplish and just their philosophies. And there's just, you know, there's a lot of inspiration out there from other brands. And just, you know, me personally, I love the outdoors. I, you know, lean towards those brands and gain inspiration from them. And I think there's just a lot to be learned from their approach and what they've done, and to bring that back into beer and help, starting with Oxbow and my brand, our brand, and then the beer category in general, to help it, you know, create just an even wider spread. You know, I don't know exactly where we're at in terms of beer, but 10, 11% or whatever it is for craft beer. And I
think it was 15 until seltzer came along.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, seltzer. That's another conversation. But yeah, I think that craft beer has a lot of room to grow, and, you know, we look for inspiration just outside of our own industry. I think that's important.
Yeah, it seems like a piece of maturity that beer is very small still, but it's gotten big enough and has enough sort of cultural cachet that it can start to surround itself with other things that are also very interesting to the same kind of people. Yeah. And I think there's more to explore there. Having more to explore seems like an important part of that to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is something that you think you maybe have learned from a brand like Yeti or a Patagonia or somewhere else along the way that you've been able to internalize as a small business owner yourself, with somebody that has a brand and a story?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm talking about Yeti, I've had a wonderful time working with those guys, and they've supported me tremendously and are making great efforts to support other craft breweries in the beer scene. You know, what they've accomplished from a quality standpoint, you know, the products are the highest quality possible. They're really, you know, putting money and time into quality, community, just like trying to do the best that they possibly can. And so that's tremendous inspiration. And then Patagonia, you know, when I read Yvon Chouinard's book, Let My People Go Surfing, which is just, I would consider required reading for any business owner, you know, their perspective and philosophy on how to run a company, how to treat your coworkers, all that is just, yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned there, and I think Yvon's a good guy to look up to.
Last question for me is the same one I asked for Chris. I'm probably going to end up asking everybody this year just because I'm personally very curious about it, but what's an example of something you did for yourself these past couple of years to take care of yourself, and then what's an example of something that organizationally that you guys did to take care of each other?
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to make sure to take care of myself well enough to have enough of a work-life balance to always be inspired and psyched when I'm going to work. You know, I see other, you know, colleagues do nothing but focus on their job, and they get burnt out, and then their job's not fun, and then maybe they don't do as well at their job. So since day one, it's been important for me. I mean, long before starting the brewery, I have my passions. I love to ski, I love to fish, I love to be outdoors, family, friends, all that stuff. So I've just made sure to not lose touch of that.
So coming down a day early yesterday to go fishing is kind of a part of that?
Early to go fishing, you know. But and then really just, you know, because that's so important to me, also making sure that our coworkers know that it's important for them too, and making sure that they have that opportunity to do the things they love, you know, whether that's go skiing or whether that's just to take the time to be with your family. We pride ourselves on having a really, you know, flexible workplace and really trying to work around our coworkers' schedules and lifestyles, and certainly over the past couple of years that's been way more important than ever. So maybe I can't point to like one specific thing, but I've just been trying super hard to communicate with our crew over the past couple of years and make sure that people are feeling safe, feeling comfortable, and feeling like they're getting what they need to keep persevering during what's been a very challenging time.
Well, there's a big difference, and I think a lot of leaders maybe miss this. I've missed it plenty of times, between you doing the right things for yourself, but not necessarily doing it in a way that models it for others to take the same permissions and to feel like it's accessible to them as well. You know, it's easy for the boss to take time off, but forget to show everybody else they can do the same, right? And to make sure that's clear and safe and easy to do. So, yeah, that modeling goes a long way.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Does anybody have a specific question for Tim before I let him go? I'm happy to field a question or two from the audience. We have a minute. No? Tommy Arthur, you're awake, right? What'd you throw for bait yesterday? Tommy Arthur would like to know.
What's up, Tommy? I was fly fishing, so we were throwing. It was nighttime, small black flies.
Oh, he's going to talk shit about your question right out of the bat. Did you tie it yourself?
I didn't tie those ones myself, but I do love tying flies. That helps keep me grounded, too. But I'm excited for Tommy to talk. For anybody, we got Tommy Arthur over here. Well, talk about Carnival. That was a beer, very important to me. So, yeah, just really pumped for these folks that are coming to talk afterwards.
I'm just really pumped for him to stay sober long enough to be last on stage. That's what I'm excited about. Because, yeah, because we've done this before, Tommy. All right. Hey, man, it's been a pleasure having you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Psyched for everybody else to come after me. And cheers, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Green Bench. Cheers, everybody. Enjoy the fest.